look on their face. The child knows they can manipulate them.
Bonnie, just digressing for a moment, you know, one health professional to another, why do you think it is there is so much coveted misinformation or lack of information coming out to the general public regarding vaccines or food sources, or the fact that kids need EFAs in their formulas? I mean, why isn't this information getting out?
Politics and money. It's politics and money
They're
trying to hide
benefiting by
it.
children being sick?
Absolutely.
That's
How
such a
can you sell
travesty.
drugs if kids are well? If nutrients will correct the situation, you can't sell Ritalin, can you?
America has to stand up and rebel.
Right. But the point is, it's got to come from the consumer.
Right.
In Europe, where, they have socialized medicine, there's no money to be made in pushing medicine. So they have all these alternatives. Here, there's big money and it's politics. So we as consumers have to become educated enough to stand up and say, no more,
Right.
we won't do it.
Right. It's just appalling. Okay, tell me this. We're seeing more teenage depression
Wow. And violence.
and violent. Well, we
I
know
mean,
all about that.
I was in San Diego 2 weeks ago, just when the shooting occurred. That child, of course, was a marijuana smoker, and he was heavily into marijuana. We don't know what else he was on. Do you also know that the Columbine and several other of the really serious incidents of teen violence were with children who were on antidepressants, like Prozac?
Couple
So,
that with a dead food diet for enough years, and you're looking
Right.
at a kid who has some serious chemical imbalances.
but you see, again, I get the teenagers that come in, and the parents say, my child is depressed, the doctor wants to put my child on, a myriad of medications, but I don't want to do it. And again, I ask the same question, well, what did the blood test show? They never did a blood test. We see iron deficiency anemia, we see protein anemia, which is shown in a low ferritin, we see high normal white blood counts indicating yeast overgrowth, we see high basophil indicating allergy, and nobody ever looked at this. I said, okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get all the physical problems controlled first. Then you talk to your doctor about medication. They never need that step because the child's fine.
Isn't that amazing?
And it empowers somebody to have control, to do something for themselves, rather than having somebody on the outside saying,
Controlling their
poor
medication.
you, you
Right.
need meds.
Well, why is it they're not doing proper blood workup on these kids?
Because if they find out that it's a physical problem, they have to treat that instead of giving
Giving
the
the
meds,
drug.
which is the quick fix. Between what you and I do when we sit down with somebody, we spend an hour and a half with them, going over all of the information. That is not done. You go into the doctor's office, quick diagnosis, here's the medication, get out. You've
Right.
got 10 to 15 minutes and you have to get out. So you don't have the time to spend with them.
Right.
But if a doctor thinks there could be something else, they could refer to a good nutritionist.
Right.
But very seldom do.
Well, I've referred a number of people to you within my family. I don't think they've called, have they?
I don't think
You got
so.
an artisan call? Okay.
You can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink.
Oh, Madonna mia, we won't even go there. So, what is this about the incidence of reverse anorexia? Why is this going on?
Well, again, obesity and an anorexia are often two sides of the same coin. Anorexia, you just have no appetite, you don't want to eat from eating terrible foods and not nourishing your body. Obesity, you keep eating and eating and
You're
eating and you
always
can't
craving
stop because you're
nutrients.
craving things you don't have. But studies have shown that kids who have anorexia and severe eating disorders where they can't stop eating are almost always extremely low in zinc. Zinc nourishes the brain, it aids carbometabolism, protein metabolism. Even a study done in Washington State where girls were dying of anorexia, they put a huge amount of zinc into their IVs, and within 2 days they were ravenous. So, but that's not looked at. So you have to look at nutrient deficiencies. And again, I see a lot of anorexic girls, they're not doing the eating thing, although they obsess about what they're eating, but they'll eat normally, but then they'll exercise for 4 hours.
Right.
And their parents say, well, they can't be anorexic because they're eating. But wait a minute, 4 hours of exercise
We're
and
burning
1,000
it too, too many.
calories? I don't think so.
Right.
So, but it really is the same side. I mean, it's the other side of the same coin. It's just terrible, terrible eating. And it does, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I think with most anorexia, it's malnourishment first, serious physical imbalances, and then you start developing the emotional. And once you get that emotional edge, it's very difficult to reverse it.
Right.
And again, I always recommend that people do the counseling along with the nutritional.
Now, are you seeing an increase in anorexia in your practice? Or
Absolutely.
obesity, or both?
Both. Absolutely both. I mean,
isn't
there are
outrunning the
certain
other.
high schools, they call them vomit patrols. They go around so that the girls can't vomit
Seriously?
in the bathrooms. Oh, that's very common at high schools today. And the bulimia is really severe too. Again, you know, a lot of it does come from looking at these paper-thin models and actresses on television. But again, if a girl has a real good self-image because she's in balance, she's not going to buy into that as much. And I'm seeing a lot more anorexia and bulimia in boys, too.
Seriously?
A lot of them who have to make weights for sports, but a lot of them just who have a self-image problem, and we're seeing a lot of that going on. Much more, I never saw an anorexic boy until about 5
Amazing.
years ago.
I have never had one in my
Yeah,
practice.
and now I have, I would say I have at least a dozen a year.
Really?
Or obsessive compulsive, where food is just measured and counted to the nth degree. But again, it starts with malnourishment, starting with pregnancy, with not breastfeeding and giving terrible formulas loaded with carbs.
What are parents supposed to do about formulas, by the way? Because there aren't any to speak
except
of,
for
except
that,
for the Ross.
that only, and that one isn't great either. It's just
milk
better.
base?
No, it's soy based.
Just
And
soy-based?
again, they have definitely proven that the milk-based formulas, unless they're hydrolyzed so that they're pre-digested, are a major cause of type 1 diabetes in children. So I don't recommend the milk-based formulas. And all of the things they're saying about, oh, soy could do this, maybe the child's going to have too much estrogen, that is absolutely ridiculous, and no studies have proven that to be the case.
Well, it takes a pretty mucked up liver not to be able to break your metabolites down
Exactly.
efficiently, so.
But again, if parents, if the mother can breastfeed for at least 6 months, or a year, of course, would be wonderful, and then wean to like a soy milk or a rice milk that's calcium fortified with a lot of essential fatty acids, it would be great. And you can even put safflower oil or other essential fats into soy milk or rice
Right.
milk. But you can't give that to an infant. So, but if they do have to do a formula, you can just add a few of your own things to it. I would always recommend adding the essential fatty acids.
Right.
So, and
So
I've
you
worked
like
with
the
people doing
flaxseed
that.
oil?
Yes, that's excellent too.
Okay.
You know, whichever one the child does best with is the one we would probably go with. There could be a mixture of several.
Okay. All right. So you
So-
like the soy base and then just kind of compounding
Add
on
some
top
of those,
that.
and then as soon as a child's able to eat real food, we push the fats and we push fish, especially fatty fish like salmon, sardines.
Cold water. Okay.
Right.
So we know our kids aren't doing well in this country. How do we start changing this as parents?
Oh, well, first you can buy my book when it comes out.
Absolutely.
And
Well, the first book is out, isn't it?
right,
Nutrition
okay, you
in
buy
Nut-
the first
Get
book.
the nutrition in a
Right.
nutshell.
So,
eh?
so that will be for the parents to be as healthy as they can when they conceive.
Because if the parents are bringing garbage home for themselves, the kids are never
Right.
going to subscribe to anything
And you can
other.
say, oh,
than that.
don't eat that. That's for mommy and daddy. I can eat the
Not
cookies
fair.
and cakes and candies. Right. It's not
Right.
fair. So if you're going to eat the foods, you don't want to eat them in front of the children. You want to
Okay.
put a united front and eat well. But it does start with the parents. So at conception, you can have as healthy a baby as possible. You don't take medications during pregnancy unless, you know, there's some serious situation. After birth, and we can talk about this at another session, you are very careful about how you vaccinate, and you breastfeed as long as you can, and you get the essential fats. You start them out on a lot of proteins, fats, very little carb, and the healthier the better carbs.
So you believe a high-protein breakfast is good for kids?
Excellent.
Like
I
what?
always recommend protein first. Egg is wonderful.
Great.
And even though egg white I don't recommend until a year, egg yolk because it's a complete food. loaded with B12. We give egg yolk, you know, probably about 6 months. And I don't recommend, I mean, you do have to start with a few fruits and vegetables, sweet potatoes, apples, bananas, but that's just to get the child used to eating food that's easily digestible. As soon as you think they're ready, you introduce the proteins.
Okay.
So, and then by a year, if they have a good amount of proteins and fats, you can easily stop breastfeeding.
Isn't that great?
Yeah,
So it means
and
being
it works.
mindful. And you know
It
what? I think a
works.
lot of our moms don't cook these days. We've got a
But
lot
you
of single
don't
parent
eat-
families.
But you don't
and-
even have to cook. You can go to so many Whole Foods markets where they have already prepared foods. They have so many kid-friendly foods now that are healthy. Believe me, 15 years ago, when I was revamping our whole family's eating habits, it was much more difficult than it is today.
Right.
There's no excuse today.
I have a quick question as far as your opinion and your stance on hormonally treated meats and genetically engineered foods, of which 77%.
Awful, awful.
So
That's
the mainstream of our population goes to store, you know,
Right.
standardized grocery stores, not Whole Foods. What do?
right. Well, you see, a lot of grocery stores today do have those options. The genetically engineered foods are harder to avoid, but if you see the sign non-GMO, you know it's safe. But even regular grocery stores know that there's a market for healthy foods, and so they're getting into it. Every grocery store in my neighborhood,
There's a
you
section.
can get hormone-free foods. And with so many of these animal byproducts being fed to animals, you have no idea what's in them. If they're organic
Right.
or kosher,
Right.
they will be much, much safer.
Right.
And so again, that today, you have to do a little bit more homework, and it might cost you a little more, but when you talk about your total health, it's worth it.
It's like a life insurance policy, not only for
Exactly.
you, but for your kids. You're going to insure them of longevity with vibrant health, which
Yes, and my children and grandchildren, we spend a lot on food, but we don't spend a lot of money on doctor's visits,
Exactly.
except for well baby visits.
What's interesting today, my daughter received a notice that her monthly payment for her medical coverage went up by over 50%. Now she never uses it. It went.
She's paying for everyone else.
Well, I called them and pretended I was her. They said, "Well, you're paying for the other people in your group. They're all using pharmaceuticals, and they've more than doubled in price. So we have to double your price." I said, "Well, you know what? She doesn't use them, or I don't use them." And they're
Right.
like, "Well, sorry." I said, "Well, I'm out of your group." You know what I
Right.
mean? And I was
Ridiculous.
also reading that by the year 2010, pharmaceuticals would be so cost prohibitive that parents, just to give their kid a prescription, would have to forego food to pay for the drugs. So, you know, it just
I
makes really
believe
good
it.
sense to avoid drugs altogether, medications. It's
That's right,
ridiculous.
because that way, if you have to avoid them, you'll have an option.
You'll have an option. So,
Right.
Bonnie, we're out of time. Thank you for
Already.
joining me. Yes,
It was
flies.
wonderful being here as usual. I'm sure I'll be back
You
again.
will always be back, God willing. So thank you for joining us, and please, for your kids' health, you know what, take good care. Think about what you're doing, look at labels, be a savvy consumer, and give us a call if you need to talk more to Bonnie or myself, and I'll refer you over to Bonnie, and she's great with kids and great with parents. Take care.
Thank
Good night.
you.
I'm Deborah Arneson with Health Quest.